Opportunities for Therapeutic Horticulture at Botanical Gardens. This session is being recorded and is expected to be available on Florida Horticulture for Health Network YouTube channel, and the content may be used as an article. Welcome to the webinar, Opportunities for Therapeutic Horticulture at Botanic Gardens webinar. This is being hosted by the Florida Horticulture for Health Network and the Carolinas Horticultural Therapy Network.
Do you currently work at a public or botanical garden? The audience for this session includes people who do work at public gardens, as well as people who would like to deliver therapeutic horticulture in these settings. We'd like to thank you for joining us.
I am Lesley Fleming from the Florida Horticulture for Health Network, and I'm a registered horticultural therapist, and I have provided consulting services for several botanical gardens.
And I'm Heather Kelejian, representing the Carolinas Horticultural Therapy Network. I'm an extension agent in therapeutic horticulture in New Hanover County, Wilmington, North Carolina, the director of the Ability Garden, and I work on staff with North Carolina Cooperative Extension, training folks in the use of therapeutic horticulture as a modality to support program goals. My work entails activities at botanical gardens, among other responsibilities for public education. I have been with the Ability Garden since 2004, working with a wide array of special populations in a public garden setting. The program's current focus areas include youth with behavioral issues, young adults with disabilities, trauma survivors, and adult education in the benefits of horticulture for overall wellness. The Ability Garden is open 7 days a week, and all of our programming occurs on the grounds of the New Hanover County Arboretum or through outreach. And our program is heavily supported through North Carolina Cooperative Extension.
Great. My experience at Botanical Gardens, consulting with therapeutic horticulture programs, has been with the Birmingham Botanical Gardens in Alabama through their education department, and with the Naples Botanical Garden in Florida at their Buehler Enabling Garden. My work on programming, adaptive garden features, and written materials was developed for a variety of populations, including children, special needs clients, and people with visual impairments.
Our discussion today will focus on what programs exist at Botanical Gardens, models for developing potential programs, and populations who may benefit from therapeutic horticulture.
So let's talk about delivering therapeutic horticulture at Botanical Gardens, beginning with an important definition. Therapeutic horticulture is the participation in horticultural activities facilitated by a registered horticultural therapist or other professionals with training in the use of horticulture as a therapeutic modality to support program goals. Therapeutic horticulture is the process through which participants enhance their well-being through active or passive involvement in plant and plant-related activities. And you see the definition up on the screen. So there are different capacities where someone might deliver therapeutic horticulture at Botanical Gardens, and let's go through these. First role would be as a consultant, and that might be consulting for garden design, for enabling gardens, adaptive tools, and adaptive gardening and programming. A second role might be as a contractor, and that would be delivering services for programs or workshops and or special events. And then the third capacity we list here would be as paid staff at the Botanical Garden, full or part-time, with tasks related to therapeutic horticulture, therapeutic gardens, or perhaps improving accessibility. Next capacity is working for a community group, partnering with a garden for programs and or visits. And then the last role that we've identified here, but probably not the last role that exists, would be working as extension staff, and the North Carolina model is an example. And that would be doing workshops, garden design, or bringing other programs and or participants to the garden with a horticulture or therapeutic horticulture focus. So let's share some models of therapeutic horticulture at Botanical Gardens to demonstrate the scope of such programming and services. Starting off with programs, Heather, you take the lead.
Great. So we're going to start with the Cape Fear Botanical Garden, which is located in Fayetteville, North Carolina. The programs that they have are Healing Elements of Nature, which is for people with disabilities, a veterans program, Hope Grows series, where they teach veterans to vegetable garden, and Warrior Spouse and Family Reset programs that works with the veterans and their families, both when the veterans are deployed and when they come back. And the program at the Cape Fear Botanical Garden is funded through the garden, and they have a full-time therapeutic horticulture staff person who works through the garden there. In Hendersonville, North Carolina, we have Bullington Gardens, which is in the mountains and serves a wide variety of populations through activities at the garden and outreach. Horticultural therapy is delivered to older adults, veterans, cancer survivors, and young adults with developmental delays. And this is a program that is also sponsored through North Carolina Cooperative Extension. They have an extension agent who runs the therapeutic horticulture programming at the garden. Our next program is at the North Carolina Botanical Garden in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They offer a therapeutic horticulture certificate, and they work with the farm at Penny Lane through a partnership with UNC Chapel Hill, which has a focus on mental health for immigrant populations and socialization after their journey, bringing them to the US. And that program actually has a full-time therapeutic horticulture education position at the Botanical Garden. And then they also contract with consultants, therapeutic horticulture consultants, to do the work at the farm at Penny Lane. So they use two different types of models in their program. There are quite a number of therapeutic horticulture programs across the country, and Lesley is going to share a few more with you.
Great, thanks, Heather. So here's the first example I'd like to talk about at Denver Botanical Gardens. Their therapeutic horticulture programs are quite wide-ranging, and they include sensory adventures, low sensory mornings supportive for people on the autism spectrum, and they have a program called SPARK, S-P-A-R-K, for people living with dementia and their care partners, as well as off-site sensory adventures, horticultural therapy services. They have Chatfield Farm, which delivers a veterans farm program, and an internship program partnering with Craig Hospital. Next example, Fairchild Tropical Botanic Gardens, and that's in Miami, Florida. And they partner with community groups off-site and at the gardens. And this includes senior facilities, dementia populations, and children with autism. So they have this wonderful program to engage students of all ages. It's called the Fairchild Challenge, and it integrates science, art, literature, and horticulture into learning using, as the name suggests, challenges. And this can be delivered as therapeutic horticulture or recreation or education. I think this is an interesting motto for you to think about. Next example of therapeutic horticulture programming at public gardens is Legacy Silverton Medical Center. It has a botanical garden on site at the trauma center, and it has programming from several therapeutic disciplines. Now, this garden and this model of hospital botanical gardens are mentioned in the Journal of Therapeutic Horticulture, their 2022 issue, with an article, and you see it on the screen, Horticulture for Health Activity at U.S. Hospitals, Horticultural Therapy, Gardens, Nutrition-Led Program, and Hospital-Affiliated Community Gardens. Okay, next, Murakami Museum and Japanese Gardens. Stroll for Wellbeing Therapeutic Walking Program was initially created by a nursing professor. She developed it for seniors with mild depression, and it's now being used with teachers, healthcare professionals experiencing stress, and as a wellness program. This project was originally developed as a research study with the Florida Atlantic University's College of Nursing, and it was funded through the Institute of Museum and Library Science with a manual for such programs to be replicated as part of their funding requirement. Cheyenne Botanical Gardens. This has a unique therapeutic horticulture program where the participants with physical challenges, senior citizens, and at-risk youth are its volunteer workforce. They help to manage the garden maintenance, which is quite unique. This volunteer work provides meaningful purpose for the participants, and their health challenges are considered and are integrated into horticulture-focused hands-on activity.
So what are the best contacts at Botanical Gardens when proposing a therapeutic horticulture program? What relationships are important to build and to establish the TH programming? Lesley, will you start us off with some thoughts on that?
Certainly, Heather. So I would suggest try meeting with the most senior person you can make contact with, and that's probably the executive director or director of education. And then what you want to have prepared is a short elevator speech outlining what you can do and what your programming ideas can provide. I would also mention other programs at Botanical Gardens, and this webinar will give you some examples today, and mention people you know at the garden, even community members or local groups you're delivering programs to. And remember, one of the models partners with community groups to deliver programs at Botanical Gardens. So these will be appealing for many reasons, including opportunities for diversity, equity, and inclusion for its visitors. Now, Heather, you have some good tips. Please share those.
So programs in botanical and public gardens have a great potential to make therapeutic horticulture available to many different populations. They can be very accessible, with botanical gardens often on lines of public transportation and usually adhering to ADA requirements already. Many of the programs highlighted started out with ideas from one or two people and have grown as the support and resources in the garden grew. So it's very important to keep in mind a few things as you're approaching a botanical or public garden to start a program. Make sure to be flexible in your conversation. You want to provide the garden with things that will work for them. And design your programs based on resources available, not what you wish you had, but what you actually have. You can start small. At the Ability Garden, I always like to tell people we started using recycled yogurt cups as pots. And we have come a really long way from that, but we built interest around that, relationships and support. And the reason we've been able to last for over 20 years now is because we didn't ever extend ourselves beyond our resources and support. And we built out as more resources became available. We now have master gardeners doing tours for seniors, youth, and those living with disabilities. And so that is completely scheduled through the master gardeners and is a form of therapeutic horticulture that came about because of our program, but now we don't have to manage that piece of it. So we bring other organizations into our therapeutic programming too, like having yoga and facilitated meditation in the garden, and you can target specific populations with those activities. So it's really, to me, there's so many different ways that you can bring this into a public garden space.
Great. So moving on to populations to work with at Botanical Gardens, we've already mentioned a few. We've mentioned at-risk youth, seniors, wellness groups, healthcare workers with stress, and hospital patients. So let's look at a few more. In the original webinar, participants shared some of their ideas, which we're going to mention shortly, but the first one that I'd like to start off with is veterans. The New York Botanical Garden partners with James Peters VA Hospital for a program called Thrive, and this is delivered at the New York Botanical Garden. And on the screen, you can see there's also a program at Cape Fear Botanical Gardens. Next population on the screen are cancer survivors, and the example that I'd like to share is at Denver Botanical Gardens. It has a cancer journey as reflected through the Art of Bonsai theme, and it partners with the Rocky Mountain Cancer Society.
And then in our program in Wilmington, we work a lot with food insecure folks. So we have a seed to harvest programs in 3 different neighborhoods. And that is where we are teaching low income residents to grow vegetables. And that is with the goal to improve their overall wellness by getting them outside and active and getting more fresh vegetables into their diet. And some of the programs at the Cape Fear Botanical Garden also work on that same goal.
Right. Now, Heather, one of the things I've noticed, there appears to be a wider acceptance within horticultural therapy circles of food insecure as a population, and a population that can benefit from HT and TH programming. And I think this is based on the link between access to healthy food and better health, which is being more widely acknowledged. And I think this is one area that is a huge opportunity for people.
It is. And I just like to say, in line with that, when you start thinking about people who are food insecure, they suffer from higher rates of anxiety and depression because of being food insecure. So if you can address the food insecurity, you start to improve their overall mental and physical health. So to me, it's very much in line with the goals of therapeutic horticulture.
Yes, I agree. Good. So we have a few other populations where therapeutic horticulture seems to work well in public garden settings. They're varied, and really they're only limited by the resources and the commitment of those working on the programs. So the next population you see on the screen, people living with dementia, and the example here is from Naples Botanical Gardens in Florida, and they have Meet Me in the Garden for this population and their care partners. And Heather, you raised the next 2 populations, so why don't you take over?
So I work a lot with youth with behavioral issues through the New Hanover County school system. And we have outreach at 2 schools that are specifically for youth with behavioral issues, and they have mental health support staff at both of the schools. So we work in conjunction with the social workers and the counselors. And their programming is throughout the year and includes field trips to the Arboretum and other areas in our community that relate back to nature and the environment. In the garden, the students can practice working together, developing leadership and horticulture skills while managing their behavior. And it's really great to see these children be able to learn to self-regulate a little bit in the garden, which then translates back into the classroom and then helps them be able to focus, reduces their anxiety and stress. And then we also have a program for people living with disabilities. We work with young adults, again, through the New Hanover County school system. They have opportunities for socialization and to gain vocational skills. And one of those vocational skills that they work on is learning how to use public transportation to get to the garden.
That's great. So I guess they're working on increasing physical stamina, things like range of motion, strengthening pincer grip. So again, a wide range of therapeutic goals that can be built into the programs. That's wonderful.
Definitely, yes.
Okay, so a few more populations where therapeutic horticulture has been effective. Heather, did I steal your thunder here?
Not at all. So we also have a program that is relatively new for us that's working with trauma survivors. And our goal with them is to help them learn how to build a personal connection with nature as a path to healing and recovering from the sometimes physical, but more often emotional and mental trauma of the abuse that they have suffered. And so that has been a really great program. Then we also, I'm going to kick it back over to you, actually, Lesley, to talk about the autism spectrum.
Oh, okay. So there are programs at Missouri Botanical Gardens. There's resources at the California Huntington Library Art Collection and Botanical Gardens. And that one offers programs and visitors guides in support of people who have sensory challenges. So again, I think what we're trying to present are different models. It's not just delivering therapeutic horticulture programs. It may be creating materials that would be used self-guided or by the individuals visiting the gardens. Now, in the live presentation, others shared some additional populations, including, and I'm just going to run through these, victims of human and agricultural trafficking, Heather, you touched on that a little bit. And then people impacted by eco or climate change. That's an interesting population. Regina works with local elementary schools at their gardens, teaching children about the 5 senses in their sensory garden. And I'm assuming that maybe there was a field trip to a botanical garden, or the botanical garden maybe provided some expertise in creating that sensory garden. Sarah Sterling shared that social therapeutic gardening with youth of all ages seems necessary and effective, particularly with COVID. And I think she's right on the mark there. Joanna Brown mentioned people in recovery from addiction and with behavioral health challenges, and they would benefit from therapeutic horticulture programs at public gardens, as well as people who are unhoused or living within shelters. Absolutely. And Guinevere shared newcomers and refugees as possible populations for therapeutic horticulture program. Now, some of this is already occurring, and maybe this is a good prompt. If you think back to some of the programs that Heather and I have mentioned, I think maybe you'll recognize some of these. Okay, so we're going to sum this short webinar up. Therapeutic horticulture programs, they do exist at botanical gardens, but what we're here to say is there can be more. So a few ideas. Be entrepreneurial and propose new programs. Refer to existing programs and your particular talents or training in your skills, because we know how effective therapeutic horticulture can be with populations. So we're the best cheerleaders, aren't we? So let me say at this point, thanks for joining in. This webinar will be posted as a Florida Horticulture for Health Network and Carolina's Horticultural Therapy Network video on their respective websites or YouTube channels. Now, Heather, I think we do have time for some Q&A. And these were some questions that originated in the live presentation. So let's run through a couple of these. I guess I'll start off. One of the questions was, are there resources or basic outlines on developing and promoting the types of programs that we've presented today? So our answer is yes, there are, but I think the best suggestion that we can make is to take horticultural therapy courses or workshops or attend conferences to learn how to develop programs like the ones that have been mentioned. Now, there are accredited HT certificate courses accredited through American Horticultural Therapy Association, and they're at North Carolina University. Heather, am I saying that university right?
Actually, ours are not accredited through AHTA, and it's a partnership between UNC Chapel Hill and NC State, but they at this time are not accredited. Of course, I encourage people to always continue to check this because things change a lot, and I have a feeling that they will be at some point. So.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. There are also HT courses at University of Florida, University of Tennessee, and then there are some SIMGO courses available online. The one that I would recommend or know of is Mitchell Hewson's. He delivers a course on HT with people with mental health challenges. So really the easiest way to find this information is to Google HT at any of the ones that we've mentioned, or HT certificate, or the information that you might be interested in. So a few more points. I think it's important to look at the mission of the botanical garden and then make your program relevant and of interest to their mandate. And I've always been surprised at how varied their botanical garden missions might be. Second, you really need to be familiar with the botanical garden facilities before your presentation. This is critical. So what you're looking for, do they already have an enabling garden? Where do you see programming occurring? Would that be inside or outside? Are there accessible paths, for example? Next tip, think about contacting regional HT groups, and these would be listed on the AHTA website, or you could send an email to me or Heather, and we'll try to connect you. The regional groups include the Florida Horticulture for Health Network, North Carolina Horticultural Therapy Network that we're from, Michigan Horticultural Therapy Association, then there's Mid-Atlantic HT Network, there's a California HT Network, and the Nova Scotia Horticulture for Health Network in Canada. as well as professional bodies. Don't forget those: AHTA, American Hort Therapy Association, and CHTA, Canadian Hort Therapy Association. Of course, there are other professional bodies in other countries. So, really networking can provide good information, especially for specific locations that the regional groups might be able to help you with.
All right, and so our next question was that we had from someone was that they missed some of the webinar and asking what programs exist at Botanical Gardens. So the webinar is posted, and so you will be able to access that again to rewatch it. But you can also visit the Florida Horticulture for Health Network website as a resource hub, which has examples and models of botanical gardens. And then, as Lesley mentioned just a minute ago, Google what's around you, because there are programs starting up all of the time. It's very hard to keep up with all of the new and wonderful things that are going on. So, and you want to find something local to you that you could use as a model. Of course, again, you can always reach out to us. One role of my job is to support people who want to start new programs. So we are here as a resource.
Awesome. And you see our email addresses on the screen. Okay, so the third question from the live recording was, what about increasing compliance with ADA, American with Disabilities Act? So I think it's great that people are interested in this, and certainly public gardens have this requirement too. Now, horticultural therapy training, provides education on this and on adaptive gardening tools and techniques. In addition to that, there are a number of ADA coordinator training certification programs. And the two that I saw were, and there are more, but the ones that I'll mention here are through the University of Missouri. And then there's an HR training center, and they cover ADA knowledge and guidelines compliance. But those, you have to investigate a little on your own, because they also include dealing with workplace grievances and administration of ADA. So it's a little bit broader than what we might be using as horticultural therapy practitioners. So, you can Google ADA training for more information, and you'll see, as I did, several examples come up.
Our next question is, does someone on staff need to be licensed or certified? Well, within horticultural therapy, we use the term professionally registered HTR, and depending on the type of programming being delivered, there may be a requirement for an HTR to oversee or deliver the program. For example, if clinical horticultural therapy is being delivered, an HTR certification is required. Training in horticultural therapy provides the standards of practice which cover different types of programming. So if you're interested, I suggest you go to the professional bodies website at AHTA or CHTA and get informed about these. You can also email Lesley and I, and we can provide more information to you privately. It is a little bit right now of, I don't want to call it a maze, but a little bit of a journey to explore certification and decide what would be best for you and your program. That is a little bit a part of the legwork that you're going to have to do.
Right. And I would totally agree with that, Heather. So hopefully this webinar has provided some valuable information on therapeutic horticulture occurring at botanical gardens, and more importantly, perhaps opportunities for new programs. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's contributed to this session: Heather, my co-presenter, Bree Stark, Sarah Sterling, the Carolinas Horticultural Therapy Network, and the Florida Horticultural Therapy Network. Thanks, everybody.